All right, so let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome to part 2 of the CX strategy series. For those in the audience that are attending this for the first time, this is a 3-part series where we're going to talk about how forward-thinking organizations are moving beyond AI experimentation and actually driving measurable results. Now, throughout the series, we're joined by our CEO Swapnil Jain. We're also joined by our industry experts, Deann Moore, who comes with decades of experience in change management and CX transformation. And we're also joined by David Wilson, who's the founder of Impactify.cx. Now, I do want everybody here to do quick, brief intros for the audience again. But before we go into that, to everyone, I am Sneha. I head the business value and analytics department here at Observe.AI, and I'm going to be the moderator for this session. Over to all of you for some intros.
I can go next. Everyone, I'm Swapnil, founder and CEO of Observe.AI. Excited to be here. And Deann and David, thank you so much for the opportunity. Looking forward to the conversation and hearing real world stories from both of you. Deann?
Sure. Hi, Deann Moore, and recently retired, but spent many years and decades, as Sneha said, in change management across multiple industries and change management and customer experience and technology solutions. And excited to be here, and thank you all for having me.
And I'm David Wilson, founder and CEO of Impactify. I've spent about probably as many decades as Deann now in large scale companies and brands like Capital One, Uber, and DoorDash, leading their global support network teams.
Awesome. Okay, so some context for the audience, as this is part 2 of the series. A little recap. In part 1, we talked about why CX is the hotbed for AI. And some of the points that came out of that discussion were rich interaction data. Now, this is a space which has millions and millions of interactions, and every interaction is a golden signal into optimizing your customer journey. Now, outside of rich interaction data, we also identified that CX as a domain seems to have a lot of repeatable workflows or use cases where AI can drive faster time to value. Then we talked about immediate return on investment. That could be not just cost savings, but also revenue generation. And then we touched upon how the customer's expectations are also evolving with the entire AI landscape today, right? So customers want to make sure that their experience is seamless, frictionless, while making sure that hyper-personalization is not compromised. And so with those points, we want to build upon today's session and dive a little deeper into how are some of these organizations solving for the operational challenges in CX. When we say that there are a lot of repeatable use cases, what types of repeatable use cases are we referring to? When we say faster time to value, how are companies measuring faster time to value? Where are they seeing immediate return on investment? And so that's the layer that we want to peel back as part of today's discussion. And before we kick off the discussion, I do want to center the audience on what we're going to be covering throughout this session. And that's going to be essentially not just the use cases, but also the different solutions and how they apply to different use cases, right? So I think in the market, the way leaders see it right now is they might be overwhelmed with, applying AI being an all or nothing game, but it's really not the case, right? It is almost a continuum of identifying different qualifications like complexity, compliance, empathy, hyper-personalization. There are so many factors that go into deciding where you need to use AI and when do you need to use it. And so I'm going to flash my screen real quick for the audience to talk about how we think about solutions falling into 3 distinct buckets, and then we'll start the discussion. So let me share my screen. All right, so quick rundown here for the audience. The way we think about, the single platform view really is these 3 buckets, right? So I'm going to start on the left, which is where majority of the hype is, and that's your AI agents. And AI agents, simply put, is your agents are operating the end-to-end workflows without any human intervention. From there on, you also have something called as an augmentative use case. And this is where we talk a lot about AI copilots, real-time assistants, right? So this is where human intervention is needed, But you think about, how do I accelerate the value, the outcomes that my humans are delivering with real-time suggestions, with real-time nudges, dynamic nudges, next best actions. And then comes the assistive piece that we refer to as conversational intelligence. And this is where the industry has traditionally fit in, right? So this is where post interactions, you have organizations assessing maybe 2%, 3% of the calls and trying to make decisions for the entire organization based off of it. But now with the application of AI, the way you can receive these insights is going to be much quicker. The workflows that are currently embedded for QA teams, for supervisor teams, that's also going to drastically change. So these are the three distinct buckets that we're going to be covering throughout this discussion today. Swapnil, anything you want to add on?
No, this has been great setup. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to pass it over to you. I think the first session that we want to get started with is the autonomous piece. That's the self-service AI agents. Let me actually kick it off, and then Swapnil, I know you have a lot of questions. I think the very first thing that I do want to, ask Deann, David, both of you, is how are AI agents actually improving self-service and the speed of support today? What are you seeing in the industry right now?
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Sure.
go for it.
Yeah, okay. Look, I think there's probably a few different things that I can think of. One is, I'm going to say faster time to first response. I think that probably many of us have been in even like you obviously you're in voice queues. I live in Canada, and I can tell you that Air Canada's queue has been over an hour for the last, I don't know, 7 years or so. And so even if it's just like a simple request, you have to wait in queue. Same thing with chats. Like, I think there are organizations that do suffer from a little bit of delay in their first response. And so I think that AI actually gives you an opportunity for immediate 24/7 engagement, even if you start the conversation with somebody in an AI and then have to do some kind of handoff. At least you're getting to them early, and I think people are generally appreciative of that, rather than sitting around waiting for a reason to connect to you. And then, of course, there's going to be some cost savings with that. I think the other one for me would be it's better self-service resolution. I think like today. Chatbot experiences, or if you go through a node in a food delivery app, it takes you to an end base where it's either a yes or no outcome based on predetermined criteria that's not always connected into your internal systems, and therefore I think there's flow down that comes from that. And so I think that if you have it all tied together, I think that now it doesn't have to just look at one set of rules. It can actually analyze with additional information. What is the value or the lifetime value of this customer to me? And what else is happening in the world that can be a real-time input into an answer. And so that's it's less about static FAQs now, and now it's more about probably goal-based completion of just like common requests. So I think those two things. And then the last one I'll do, and then Deann, please. I think something that's been happening for a while, because I know it was happening at Uber early on. They were one of the first adopters that I'm aware of, that it's smarter triage. It will actually get you to the endpoint that you need to be in the fastest way. And the great example I can give there is, say, for example, you have 5,000 inquiries about to hit you. And the 4,999th and the 5,000th in queue are somebody's been in an accident and they need desperate help. They should expect that their query is handled first. And so I think that was some of the smart routing that their original AI engine did. It got you to the place that you needed to as quickly as possible at like a high quality handoff. Deann, over to you.
Yeah, you captured a lot of them for sure. A lot of those fall in that same bucket. I would think also just efficient ways for information gathering from a customer and like lessening customer level of effort. We've all been in a service interaction where we've answered a lot of questions and we get to the next person or the next stage of that interaction, and the same person asks me the same questions, and that's as frustrating to all of us as it can be. And so I think it is a way to be able to make sure that we're capturing that information efficiently in the way that the customer wants to share that. And I think it's also, you said the first, like as quickly as possible for first response, but I'd say as quickly as possible as ultimate resolution on many low value, which high value to a customer, maybe low value to an organization interaction. So think about like, where is my shipment? When is my shipment going to arrive? How do I update my credit card information? Things like that that are necessary, and they need to be handled. They need to be handled efficiently. As a customer, I want to get in there, get it taken care of quickly, and move on. It's just something that I'm having to do that may not be adding value, but it's a service that I need to complete. So things like that. I need to update my address, check on refunds, check on shipments. You know, if you're in a service delivery model, maybe it's like setting windows of delivery and being able to set expectations of timing and things like that, and getting real-time updates. Those are some of the things that I think of.
Super helpful. I mean, clearly, I think what you both shared is there's immense value of leveraging AI agents at the front end of your IVR or your chatbot, either to resolve a lot of simpler queries or to route or triage better. I mean, no question. But let's peel that further. I think Jen, you started talking about some of the use cases and kinds of interaction. I mean, every company, I think in every industry gets all kinds of calls and chats, right? Some are sensitive, some are complex, some are easier, some are low value, some are high value. So you can't take a broad paintbrush and say automate everything or everything is great for AI agents. So maybe help the audience, like how should they think about what kind of queries are best for AI agents, and where should they start deploying this first, and then move on to the more complex ones. Maybe Deann will start with you this time.
Sure. I mean, I think some of those that are very clearly rules-based determinations, right? That they are if then, if this, then go this way, very logic driven. You don't have to have any human judgment, if you will, in those interactions. Like those are really ripe areas of opportunities that are really ripe and easier to automate. I think I hit on one of those, which is like heavy data collection that's needed, like authentications, gathering information, and then packaging that all up and then handing that to a human. I think that's another one. And then, again, I think it's where a customer values instant speed. Like I want to get to like, let me reset my password, unlock my account, things like that I want to get through quick. Those are two or three off the top of my head that I think about.
David, what about you? What do you think?
I might add on, I think in some cases it's replacing potential automated experiences today with just additional intelligence. So for instance, if, I'm opening up a DoorDash app because one of my items was missing, depending on who I am, I may get an instant response that doesn't require any kind of customer support because it's handled within the logic of the app, and it just says, "Great, we've refunded that order for you." But I think that in some cases, the rules then fail because, what happens if it legitimately happens to me 3 times in 1 week? I'm likely to trip some fraud rules, and then I will be denied forever, and I will never get any kind of relief from a company again. And so I think that the additional intelligence that can be then drawn from your account, beyond just a simple black and white automation rule. So I think, that's definitely something. I also think that there's lots of those cases where you don't really even need to have any kind of interaction at all. So it's like, look at where your deflection rates could really be bolstered by intelligent information applied in an AI experience. Last thing I want to say on this one too, though, is, I'm a big person on brand voice, and I have had, well, Swapnil, in 20,000 agents, 20,000 different opinions, 20,000 different ways of delivering a message. And it depends on it. Sometimes it's cultural. Sometimes you have somebody from India who says, "Hey, I hope your day is full of sunshine and rainbows." And then you have somebody from Africa who's just get to the point and get out of the conversation. I think that, a true agentic experience can actually deliver your brand
Yep.
voice very well. And so your company, your customers understand that this is part of a good experience of being with your company. That makes sense.
No, it does. So I think we clearly established AI agents at the front end are great. We spoke about some of the use cases. Moving on to metrics, what defines the success of an AI agent? And this is where I've seen, this metric float around a lot, a containment rate, right? And I often wonder, is that is that a good enough metric? Because when I call, a bank, and sometimes maybe I'm talking to AI, I hang up the phone, and are they counting that as containment? Because hey, it did contain the call, and I never called back. So what are some of the smarter ways people should look at when they define the success of AI agents at the front of either their call queue or their IVR queue? What would say that yes, the AI agents are working as expected? David, maybe we'll start with you this time.
Yeah, I'd look at the high level here for me is from a customer perspective, expectations don't really change on what they expect from you. I think, just because it's AI doesn't mean that it has to automatically be better. But I think that the opportunity here is what might change are your targets. Where at one point you might expect, I don't know what the metric is, but an 80% success rate, maybe you should expect a 90% rate because of the consistency that AI can do for you. But I do think of a few things for sure. One is, so you've talked about self-service resolution rate. I would actually think about that as being expanded to time to resolution, because I think Deanne kind of alluded to this before. Time for the overall resolution. It's one of those elusive metrics that everybody says that they really want to go for, but it's difficult to connect the dots in a typical operational ecosystem unless all of your systems are aligned, and that doesn't happen as often as one might think. But I think definitely if you've got an AI path within there, it is something that can actually help you connect the dots on the entirety of the experience so you can actually do it. I think one of my big and pet peeves is repeat caller rate, callback
Yep.
rate. I would hope that we should be able to increase the expectations that the contact rate, the recontact rate should be lower. And like set some bold targets, but make it happen. And then the last one for me is probably when a flow down happens, make sure it's the right flow down to happen. And by that, I mean, there's probably, maybe that's an outcome metric. In my mind, I think about drivers and outcomes. And so from an outcome perspective, I think it is escalation quality. And I use escalation not as I want to talk to your manager, but flow down from the original thing. So I think underneath that, you've got a series of probably driver metrics, things like accuracy, policy adherence, hallucinations that might happen. And then let me think, there was probably one more. Accuracy overall just means, did it do everything that you had expected without any incidents? And I think that's something that has to be model or monitored really closely at the very beginning of your journey, because the more you hang on, the more your model gets trained inappropriately, and then potentially you can't solve this without resetting in some way. So get in there, get your metrics set more higher metrics for you across the board, and then just monitor like crazy so that you are in fact training your model. Because look, I think people don't get how long it actually takes to train models. It's not a switch that gets flipped
Yep.
anyway. And so, that's what I think about.
David, funny, it almost felt like you're talking about quality assurance for AI agents. Accuracy, hallucination, brand voice, all sorts of
Oh
things.
yeah.
Deanne, maybe quickly from you, what are the other metrics people should look at when they're thinking
Yeah,
about the success of AI agents?
yeah, I think just a couple of other quick ones real quick is, you mentioned Swapnil, like if I call and I get frustrated, I just hang up. Like how many of those interactions actually end up with an action being executed? So I think that's one that sometimes maybe you don't call back. Like the use case you used is I call, I get frustrated, I hang up, I don't call back. So you're not going to catch that in repeat rate, right? So how do we capture that? So maybe, we're using that to listen to say, hey, I wanted an action to happen. An action actually got logged in the system. So there's some hit rate, if you will, on action rate on those interactions. And then I think just thinking about a little bit around the blended cost that you get to on resolution, right? You have the front end cost of the AI, and then you have the human cost per ticket, and you start blending those together to really get a true understanding of your blended cost per resolution.
Super helpful. I think we clearly established AI agents are great. There's a lot of use cases, and then we established some metrics. But what we also know from actual implementations and deployments is AI agents will solve maybe 30% of your conversations, 40% of your conversations. In some cases, we'll do better routing. In some cases, we'll do better triaging. But there will be a significant percentage of your call volume, or your tickets, or your chat that will end up going to human agents. And I think we spoke a lot about AI across the customer lifecycle, right? So now switching gears to talking about opportunities for us to continue to improve the frontline team and how they perform, and providing them the right tools, right? So maybe we'll start with some problem areas. Deann, we'll start with you this time, right? On what are some of the biggest pain points or challenges agents have today in their workspace, right? When you look at an agent, what are they dealing with?
Yeah, well, they're dealing with, we talked about this in the first series, but they're dealing with multiple applications and doing a lot of switching and jumping around between applications to try to piece together what they need to service the customer. That's a big one. We've continued to ask a lot of our experts and our agents out there, and I think that is a huge reality of what they're dealing with. They're dealing with complex search or maybe ineffective search tools, and being able to really get to the answer, and they're placing customers on hold, and they're trying their best, and they're also trying to remember at the same time, oh, what am I, what's the script they want me to follow?
Yeah.
Am I doing an add-on sale, or am I doing an add-on on this call? What's I'm supposed to add on to? But we just made that agent job just extremely hard with tools. We make it complex. Sometimes we sit in back offices and we think that that's a really easy job, and it's really not an easy job. And so we really are asking a lot of them. So that's two of the big ones that that I would offer.
David, your perspective, obviously you've seen agents globally, India, Philippines, South Africa, US, right? And you obviously sat with agents. So maybe give us a day in the life of agents on what problems are they dealing with?
Oof. Well, I mean that context switching is real. Um, and Deann talked about this, but maybe additional angle to this might be if you are in a live chat environment and you're at least dual concurrency in your chats, you are going from one type of problem to another and switching a lot. And I think that's an area where, an AI agent could really help support the delivery of information, especially when it comes to two really contentious and different types of conversations that are happening at the same time. It happens. But to echo what Deann was saying, like I remember being on the floor once, and I can't remember what company it was with. I do, but I don't want to name them. But I watched that individual, and they had 17 different systems that had to be
Wow.
used independently in order to solve a particular issue. Yet you can imagine that wasn't a 3-minute phone call or a 3-minute chat. But if you had the ability with whatever AI pathways you're building to be able to connect all the outputs from this and just do one, then not only are you resolving faster, but you're likely helping the agent's mindset to say, you know what, I'm okay with this company. I think I'll stay a little longer. Because look, the average attrition BPOs at times can be over 100%. We all know this. Despite what people say, it can reach 100%, and it's not because of in no small part because of complexity of a business. Like if I am paid, I'll just use dummy numbers, but if I'm paid $10 an hour to work on a sleepy program and $10 an hour to pay on a program that's taxing my brain and making me look at 17 systems, which one am I going to select, right? That's not going to buy loyalty. So I think about that. The other one is probably the post-call experience. There's a lot of companies. This is one thing that was happening very early in the AI journey, was notes can be taken for you and
Mm.
automatically submitted. And so, look, the average after call work time can be anywhere from 30 to 45 seconds. That's, in the space of a 4-minute interaction, that's a fairly significant time period to consider in terms of savings. And so if I can get rid of that, I think that one oddball one, because I love the oddball ones. Um, I think that there's I'll call it the long tail AHT.
Hmm.
If you've ever analyzed your AHT, look, you have a typical distribution curve, but then it goes on forever. And then there's going to be this little blip at the end where, a material enough portion of your interactions are going to be super long. And that's all because of the 17 systems and the context switching. But, I think of one specific case where it was a rideshare company that was dealing with the driver who was disputing a fare that was credited to their account. Um, we found that the average time for that particular contact was 34 minutes to resolve. We
Oh,
wanted a
wow.
7-minute interaction. That one was 34. The long tail on this was over 2 hours.
Oh,
And when we figured out what was going on, it was because the knowledge document that they were using in order to figure out the amount of the fare was 108 steps. And you had to follow all 108. And so, look, we fixed that because we said, can we just do 80/20 this and bring this down to 7 steps, which we did. But my point on this is don't neglect those long tail AHT cases, because there's probably something in there that, look, it may be not more than 3 or 4% of your calls, but these are your customers that you're thinking about. They just want to get their answer and move on with their day. In some way, we have interrupted your day with a broken process, and I don't need it to be 2 hours to fix it.
Yeah, totally.
I do
Um,
want
I,
to add one thing to that, post-call notes piece, right? So when I personally went to the contact center floor for, a bunch of companies, what I did notice was a lot of these agents, they're in a high stress environment. They're getting measured, like you have leaderboards on screen based on which agent is taking how many calls, how quickly are they taking the calls, how quickly are they resolving. And so to be on that leadership board, a lot of these agents, they started taking notes while on the call, right? And so when you're tab switching, you have 5, 6 different tabs, you're trying to search for knowledge across different bases. Then you hear the classic, let me put you on hold, please, while they type the notes,
Right.
right? And so that's a big challenge where you might end up compromising on the customer experience just because you have to be on that leadership board. And it is unfair to the agents to, face something like that. And I think, the place that we're in with AI today, there's a lot that is built for fairness in the way they are created. So, yeah.
yeah. Now,
That's a
if I were
great
to
point.
summarize kind of the things you all spoke about, I think for me, they fall in 3 categories. Knowledge, which is the information, right? The policy, the process, the guide, right? The 108 steps, fair calculation process, right? That's all knowledge the agent needs to do their job. The second thing which we did not cover, and I would love to hear your guys' thoughts, is it's just more like behavioral coaching, right? I mean, I think as Sneha mentioned, it's a high stress job. It's a high attrition industry, and I think also the average um, age of folks in this industry is also younger, right? So now you're in this environment, high stress, right? And also it's a very painful situation where, because the customers who are calling in are always unhappy. Right. No one calls a call center saying, "Oh, you know what? I'm so happy to call you." Right. They're like, "Oh, this is not working. That is not working." So you combine all this. I think we also see coaching as a challenge where, hey, you train somebody to be, hey, speak slowly, don't be loud, repeat yourself, right? Be nice to the customer, Don't ask them to repeat themselves, all sorts of things. And you realize like it goes out of the window in the heat of the moment. So we spoke about knowledge, totally aligned, right? What about behavioral coaching? Where does that fit um, into the agent experience and where AI can help with behavioral coaching?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's huge. I mean, everything we just talked about sounds very idealistic, right? But you think about, I mean, Sneha, you brought that to life, right? You're sitting there, there's the leaderboard, everybody's there, and everybody shows up to work and they want to, the majority of people show up and they want to do a good job. They want their name on the leaderboard. They want to win. They want to have happy customers. And sometimes you just get caught up in all of the things that we just talked about that are difficult. And so I think the coaching pieces are, whether it's sentiment based. I mean, I can sentiment and I like, oh, Deann, you're sounding like you're getting a little short or you're getting a little
Yeah.
irate with the customer. Let me give you a quick nudge here just to bring you back to frame with this customer. Or I think of things like I spent some time in the compliance world, right? And I think about things of when people are describing products or services, sometimes they misspeak and they, don't intentionally misspeak. I mean, we know that there may be some who might intentionally misspeak, but most of the time it's not because they're trying to explain it. Well, what if you could clean that up in the interaction and you can give them a nudge to say, hey, wait, you just told them that a deductible was this amount. You need to go back and clean that up. And you think about like real-time coaching because all of us if something small, it's easier to coach and easier to,
Yeah.
and real time, talk about near real time feedback. It's always more effective in the coaching world. So if I can give you real time nudges, I think that is huge. And do it in a way that's making agents feel like that we are helping them be successful. So oftentimes you hear agents think, I don't know what you're doing to help me be successful. So I think these nudges can be, and that type can be huge to help them like, hey, we're on your side. We want you to win. We're all going to win together. Let's use the system to help in the moment, help you be better instead of coming back a week later and say, oh, we heard this and we're going to get punitive with you now. I think that's one of the biggest ways that we can use it in a real-time fashion.
Super helpful. And David, maybe a different question for you. Right. So we spoke about knowledge benefits. We spoke about coaching, real-time behavioral coaching. You spoke about automatic summary generation, right? Now, if you think about the ROI of all of this combined and the metrics, we spoke about the metrics for AI agents on the front end side. What are some of the key metrics that you would measure that tells you that this is actually helping provide a better customer experience and also helping with agent productivity?
Well, not to get too mathematical about things, but I kind of like to think about things in terms of standard deviation. I think if you think about the typical distribution curve, it probably looks like this from you input whatever metric, FCR,
Yeah.
CSAT, handle time. But I think that my goal has always been to get consistency. It should be as tight a band as possible in the outcome. And I think um, there's not a whole lot of ways to actually drive that without really intense monitoring and like I don't think that teams have enough time to be able to do that. But I definitely think that variance in terms of standard deviation is one way that I think about achieving the benefit of something like that. I think for sure another one might be if we think about where calls or chats go off the rails, it's always the unsolvable problem at the front line.
Mm.
And so I think, or they just handled it wrong, or they're ping-ponging back and forth between
Yeah.
agents because they want the right answer. But what happens with that is, eventually they go up the chain of escalation support. So I think, what can you do to reduce the amount of escalations that actually are in your business? And look, the food delivery business is very tough to be great all the time. Most like you say, most people are calling in because they didn't receive an order in full or in part, or the food quality was bad, and everybody wants a refund. Not everybody can have one, and so Knowing when and having confidence that anything that gets escalated is not because it could have been avoided by an agent in the first place is probably one of those driver metrics, agent caused or not. And so I think applying some help and support to the front line through AI options would definitely help there. Um, I think I think there's probably something to just to expand this point a little bit around the ability to self data mine your own interactions. You and I had a conversation at the very beginning of our time together about how important it was that agents should have real or near real time access to the interactions that they handle because look, it's one thing for a team lead to spend, the half hour of coaching time that you're going to have. You're not going to be able to do a whole lot in that, and most organizations are not going to give you much more time than that, to be honest with you. But what I would love to have done back in the day, in the early 90s, when I was a call center agent myself, working for the Canadian Tax Department, was let me give me my
Yeah.
opinion of what I did well and maybe not so well within this call so that I can actually understand two things. What did I do? What could I have improved upon? But what could I have improved upon at the macro level, right? Like how many times do I do this? I think that's also an important metric that just from an individual's perspective, they should be looking into. I think it actually makes sense to democratize that data in any way that you can and make it available to everybody. And that means the most important person is gonna want to hear it, the person who actually delivered the experience, because they're in the days of manual QA, I'm probably not seeing that information for a week and a half. And do you think I remember that interaction that
Yeah.
happened that you're giving me a 0% score for? Heck no! Give me real-time information.
I think, David, you kind of brought up something that we'll talk about in the next section around self-coaching. And that's possible if you move away from a supervisor coaching to an AI coaching model. So maybe using that as a segue to our third big pillar of how AI can help contact centers and customer experience is AI for operations, right? I think one of the key things that most people don't know about is there is a big portion of what happens after the call is over, right? There are quality teams, there are supervisor teams, there's team leads, there's managers who are focused on better training, better coaching, improvement of agents, hiring, performance reviews, right? And the source of truth for all those conversations actually live in the customer service interactions, right? And so far, we know that before AI, all of this was manual, right? You would have manual teams who would manually sample a handful of calls, chats, listen to them, score them, and use that as a basis of truth for every single thing in a contact center. So maybe we'll start there. Deann, we'll start with you, right? Like, how are you seeing now with AI coming in? The operations team, agent, managers, supervisors, QA are able to leverage AI to do their job better and faster.
Yeah, I think a couple of things. I'm going to pull one more point back from the last one into this conversation too. I think we coach behaviors. We don't coach outcomes. And that's the problem. That's the thing that we often forget. I'm looking at the leaderboard and I want to be like the leaders, and that's not okay. Then that means to wrap up my calls, I need to resolve more. Well, what does that mean, right? And so we really have to break that down into the behaviors that get us to the leaderboard, and what are the best of the best doing, and what are the leaders on the board doing, and how do you draw correlations between, hey, we see that when your peers use the following lead-ins, maybe when they're offering a solution, we see that they are more successful in a take rate. So I think that there's a lot of the system allows us to really understand the behaviors that lead to better outcomes. It's not just we're not coaching to metrics, because oftentimes we get stuck and our coaches and our supervisors are coping to metrics. Okay, you've got to wrap up calls quicker. I'm just banging you on what are the things I'm supposed to do. Well, now you're able to pull those together and say, hey, here's what we inspect. We inspect these points. Let's just use resolution. We inspect these points, and on these points across all of your calls, we see you're really lacking in very specific area. Just tweak that little one area and let you and I talk about, let's listen 2 or 3 calls and the system really offering up the calls to listen to where you did it well. And the system offering up an interaction where you had an opportunity and you bring that to life. And it's not just words, somebody saying you need to get better. I think that's a huge one. And I'm talking specifically there, I'm talking about coaching, but that can almost be real time as well, right? The real time nudges, you can actually offer up those types of things. I think with the quality, it's really the correlations between using, one of the other areas is between using some of the sentiment and predictive.
Yeah.
We're going to get predictive about what we think our quality scores or our customers' experience scores are going to look like, and we're going to understand that, and we're going to really dive into that and correct that before that becomes problematic. I think that's a real big area, especially when you're doing third-party work for other companies, and we know when things start going the wrong way, we've got to respond to those. What if we're self-healing? We see that it's headed in the wrong direction. We're out there, we are understanding what that is, we're presenting it, and here's what we did, and we are turning that around quickly and showing that we truly understand what's going on the interactions, and we really have our arms wrapped around there. And then, so I think the experience is one, the coaching is the other word, and the last one I would probably offer up and then shoot it to David to add some would be around training. I think, really using what's happening on the calls to shape and curate how we are preparing our agents and our experts to be on the calls in the first place. We can, again, we can write a training the way we think things are happening, but really understand what's going on in interactions and keeping that training fresh and really quickly being able to iterate that, and you're not way behind up. Okay, wow, we're seeing that experts are having problem in this area. Maybe it's in the first 3 weeks on the phone. Okay, well, let's double down on that. Let's understand where they're having problem. Let's refine that, and let's make sure we get that put into the curriculum and get that in front of them quickly. So those are 3 areas I would hit on.
Super helpful. David, what's your perspective on how can operations use AI?
Yeah, I think I agree with with everything Deann said. I think probably about a few things here. We're in a moment right now where the paradigm is shifting on complexity. If we're starting to take away all the easy interactions with AI solutions, or, deflecting completely from needing support, we'll need all of this information to be able to prepare the future agent on what is the level of complexity that they'll need. If you think about it, if an agent, let's just say an agent takes 50 calls a day, they'll probably do 5 that are really hard and complex and awful and will be the toughest to get good CSAT on. But now, that percentage, if it's only 10% of their calls before, maybe it becomes 25 or 30. And so now you need a different level of information available to the agents. And so I think, this is something that will give us time to start to understand. And if you haven't done this, you should do an exercise on, where are calls going overall in terms of contact types, and put it compare it to the complexity of the call to make sure that in the future, you will, as Deann said, be able to update your training material, but in real time, you're able to actually help folks with better information. One thing that I used to do when, I had maybe Sneha and Swapnil, your age and not the age I am today, when we had just telephone calls that were dial up and whatever. No, we used to do this thing called listening programs. And so I would bring everybody together in a room, all the management and the TLs, and we would listen to one specific contact type, and we would listen to 50 great versions of this and 50 terrible versions of this. And it was a horrible manual process, and you just wanted to rip your eyebrows off every bad call that you heard. But, I think that what AI does for us now is to be able to help understand what's really great about the interactions. Because it's not always about what's terrible. Sometimes it's about what's great, and figure it out. And I think, maybe Deann, you alluded to this a little bit, but it's like, I think it can help you understand in real time with the operations teams, even beyond training, to just say, this is what what you're encountering, what I hear, but here's how other people are actually handling it. And, like with a platform like Observe, you can play, any number of calls. And, with the beauty of Observe, and I'm not doing a commercial here for you, but it's the moments that you create that are curatable, that you can, at a moment's notice, create something else. I think that also then, I love to do trending. What is trending amongst my agent population? It's hard to do with a finite number of QA resources, to then allocate a portion of that to do trending on what are the main areas of improvement that we need. And then I think the last thing I would say is that because we're able to record 100% of those conversations, and because agents should be able to do their own data mining and therefore their own teachable moments, now instead of spending, look, if I have 100 quality assessors, I'm spending 3,750 hours a week just doing manual QA in the old days, right? Now I don't have to do any of that. Think about the possibilities of, yeah, I'm probably going to pull back on some QA resources. That's the reality of the cost world. But, like even if I keep 50 to 75 of those folks, the amount of new types of activities that can be done
Right.
to actually invest back into the business. Like I think it's super important for companies to be able to think, just don't just say goodbye to folks. Understand what the ROI is on repurposing some of these folks into an analyst role that can then translate this into real learnings from a customer experience perspective. Because I started this conversation right now by saying the complexity curve is shifting. You need to be able to prepare for the future, and that's only going to come from within your organization. It's not going to be handed to you on a silver platter, no matter how great your AI is.
Yeah, you
Absolutely.
brought up a great point on, don't think about, letting go of people. And that's something we talk about a lot, right? So especially with all of these enhancements that we have in the product, in the platform today, I think one of the ways we always think about productivity for, the QA for supervisors is more about, okay, now if you have 100% visibility into calls, you're eliminating that bias. What can you repurpose your time to? And a few different ways I think about that is maybe the responsibility between what a QA does and what a supervisor does is actually blurring, right? So QAs can potentially become supervisors. Or another way to think about it is, say you also have with AI copilots, you're essentially having like, real-time coaching embedded in the workflow. So if that also is going to be, kind of blurring out over time, then where can you repurpose that energy? And the way I think about it is calibration for your AI agents, right? So you have all this information, you have self-service, you have augmentative interactions, but at the end of the day, for all those complex use cases, edge cases, you still need people to make sure that, hey, your AI agents are, taking the right outcomes, they're actioning properly, and you still need a human in the loop for that.
Right.
So thanks for bringing that up. And one more thing that I did want to touch upon, Swapnil, which you had asked in the previous section, was measuring, AI copilot success. We touched on a lot, but one thing that it all ties to is new hire ramp time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So like the biggest success really now that you have plenty of information is you actually know what you need to focus on to train your new hires. And this is something actually one of our customers told. I can't remember exactly who, but that person told me, and this was during the prospecting stage, that, hey, Sneha, if I come in to Observe, what I want is I want to be able to go to any random person on the street, get them on your platform. They should have so much information that they should be able to do the job of a CSM or anybody else on my team. Instead of 3 weeks, I want them to do that in 3 days, right? And so that ramp time to productivity is a big piece in how.
I mean, especially with so much attrition, right? It's
Right.
a big one. I know we are coming at time here. Sneha, over to you to wrap it up, give a summary of,
Actually,
how.
can I say one thing before because like I think all of this is great, but I would put one big caveat because we haven't talked about the risks here. AI in the workplace is about trust, right? If it doesn't work, then it's your customers are not going to trust it. If your agents don't trust the information that they're getting because your model has not been well trained or it's giving out bad information, you will lose the good momentum that you believe you're building right away, and the agents will not use it at all. And I've actually seen that happen. And so take your time. That's the advice, is just take your time, get the output right before you roll out anything really broadly, and so that you allow yourself to have trust. That might be another metric here, Swapnil, is,
Mhm.
on a regular basis, just surveying your agent population to say, what is your perception of how accurate the answers that you're getting from AI is.
That actually is a good segue for the next
Yeah.
conversation. I think
Ooh,
our next conversation will be all about change management, trust, leadership, upskilling,
yeah.
right? So we obviously spoke a lot about problems and technology, but now, hey, how do we prepare an organization? And trust will be a big part of that. Sneha, over to you.
I was just about to say that, but I think first of all, thank you everybody for this discussion. I always feel like every time we chat, time passes by so fast. Um, a lot of different points, which I'll definitely be recapping as part of our next session. But for today, I'm going to try my best. So, for the audience here, we talked about the three different solutions. We looked at, the autonomous solution, the augmentative, and the assistive solution. And there, some of the key points were think about what type of interactions qualify in your organization for self-service versus augmentation. Some use cases that came up were think about maybe high urgency, low emotion use cases. Maybe think about use cases where the AI can actually execute a backend command, right? Think about use cases that are a lot easier to handle for the AI versus where human intervention is required. And when you're thinking about measuring success of all of these deployments, don't just stick to containment rates. Look at
Yeah.
whether the customers are actually abandoning the calls. And if yes, one way to think about self-service is not just inbound calls, also outbound. Is your AI capable of doing the follow-up action after the customer, hung up? And customer effort score, blended resolution. There are so many different KPIs that you need to continue measuring. The one thing to keep in mind is don't box yourself to one metric, thinking, oh, now that post interaction or this is fully AI agents, a lot of metrics that I use for post interaction don't apply. They continue to apply just across a longer customer journey. And on the co-pilot side, we talked a lot about the challenges that the agents face. New hire time to productivity. We're talking about knowledge base, retrieval faster. We're talking about, hey, the classic, let me put you on hold. You're not going to face that a lot anymore. Better customer experience overall, right? So anytime you're thinking about deploying your, use cases, especially for AI, like I begun this conversation, right? Don't think about this as, oh, this is an all or nothing game. You have so many different use cases that you need to experiment, and this is a trial and error based experimentation. So start small, start with use cases where you can get quick wins, and then scale it across the rest of your organization. So I hope I did my best trying to recap a lot of heavy hitting points that we had in this discussion. But next week, what we're going to be doing is, to Swapnil's point, we're actually going to talk about all the risks associated with deploying these changes. Not just risks, we'll also talk about what's worked out for organizations, right? What are some best practices if you're new to this, and depending on which maturity stage you're in, based on your data readiness, your infrastructure, etc., we'll also try to cover how you're deployed at different maturity stages. But looking forward to all of you joining us next week for part 3 of this session, where we're talking about organizational and cultural changes. But Deann, David, thank you again for your time today. Swapnil, thank you for asking all the important questions. Really appreciate you for your time as well.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.